Hello, good afternoon. Can I just take a moment to thank all the organizers and the technical team at Web Expo? Haven't they done a fantastic job, the organizers? Can we have a round of applause for everyone at Web Expo? So, when I was 17, I fell in love. You don't hear many tech conferences starting with that line. This girl, she was, absolutely beautiful. Blonde hair, blue eyes, a lovely name, Faye. What a beautiful name. She sat just there, actually. And I was absolutely smitten when I met her. I was just, You know when you meet someone and you just, everything in your body just changes, like you chemically react to their presence? I was just crazy about her. And I had an opportunity to make a move. She invited me to her house for dinner as a friend. And I didn't know much about girls at that point, but I knew two very important things. First of all, I knew that if I was invited to dinner, I needed to make an impression. And second of all, I knew which topic of conversation to use to make an impression. You see, I'd read a few years earlier in a skateboarding magazine, because I used to do skateboarding, that chicks dig scars. And so over dinner, armed with this fantastic piece of knowledge, I began to talk her through all the various skateboarding scars I had on my body. And she was completely engrossed in that conversation, right? Right? Wrong. She was so bored. Her eyes had fallen to the floor in agony of boredom. She was bleeding with boredom. I got nowhere with the scars. Can you believe it? I wanted to write to the skateboarding magazine and say, false. Chicks do not dig scars. I want my money back. However, just as I was about to leave and call the whole thing a write-off and have to try again with a different conversational tactic, I happened to mention that I really loved traveling and that I'd recently been to Africa and that I wanted to go to Italy one day, which in my mind is the best darn place in the world. Can I get an amen? The Italian declines to say amen. So, I happened to mention this. Mentioning Africa, all of a sudden her eyes lit up. Africa, you've been to Africa? Where in Africa did you go? Well, I went to Nigeria. And Nigeria, what's it like? Where did you go in Nigeria? I went to Lagos. It's the capital, and 100 million people live there or something. It's crazy. It's really, really busy. And we began talking about travel. And just as unengaged as she was talking about scars, to my bewilderment, she was so highly engaged talking about travel. That is how our relationship began. And that's a perfect description of the way that engagement works. This here is called the circle of engagement. And it explains the three processes, the three inexorable, inalienable, irrefutable, irreducible ways that engagement happens. The first thing that engagement begins with is a message. There is no other way that engagement can begin than with a message. Whether this is with a person, whether with a product, whether with an idea, it always begins with a message. You being here today is a result of a message being put out to you about Web Expo. You coming to this session is because there was a message put out about what this session would be about and where it was and what time it would be, and that a very handsome James Bond-like Englishman would be talking. And you all came to listen. I'm so grateful. He'll be out in a minute. The second thing of engagement is when somebody responds to the message. This is the second thing of engagement. Again, you cannot get away with it. If I keep on talking at you, you might recognize I'm putting a message across, but I can't get any further unless you respond to me. The second thing of engagement is a moment of response. I call this the gathering stage. And we can't get away from it. In fact, social science talks about this with what's called stimulus and response theory, right? Every stimulus gets a response, and that's how communication works. And many people are very good at that. All of us here today are gathering around a moment. We are in a moment of time. We have come together very specifically, very finitely in this moment right now at 2:03 on the 23rd of September. This is a moment that we have gathered. Of course, many people, they leave engagement right here. And it's sad because there is a third stage of engagement. And that's where you take what you've shared in a moment like this, in a moment where people have gathered, and you turn that into a lasting resource, something that enables and empowers and impacts and helps people so that you can build a new foundation and go on the circle again. As we can see up here, this circle is iterative. So after Faye and I had spoken about travel, we had such a great time that now there was something that was meaningful about that conversation that had contributed to our friendship and to our relationship. And because of that, next time we got together, I could begin talking about Italy. If I began talking about scars, I would have gone back to the beginning. But instead, I started talking about Italy, and we built on where we left off. All of our relationships and friendships go like this. The friends that we have the best relationships with are the ones that we've engaged with the most and had the most meaningful conversations over and over and over again. And it keeps on building this bigger and bigger circle of engagement. It's the same thing with the products that we use. Our products are ones where there was a message put out, we responded to that message, then the product gave us something meaningful, we had a meaningful interaction with it, and then they built on that and we built on that, and around and around and around and again we go. I was in a session earlier on with Saskia talking about MailChimp, right? MailChimp's a great example. When you send one campaign, you now build on that success. It's not like starting again. When most of the products that we have, once you've used it, you build on it. How many remember the days when you joined Facebook, like 10 years ago or something? And you joined Facebook and you get a friend, and once you got a friend, it was like now you started again, but further on. There was more going on. Engagement had built, and so it was meaningful and valuable to you. Well, that's the way, that's the process by which engagement works. And that's kind of cool. That's kind of a big deal. And my theory is that the way that we engage with people in this process is the same way that we engage with products, we engage with ideas, indeed, we engage with anything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Engagement is really the perfect word to use for this. And when we think of engagement, we generally think of an engagement ring. How many men or women here today are wearing an engagement ring? Could you put your hands in the air and maybe bling me a little bit of your engagement ring? A few people. You guys need to get out more. Jokes, jokey-o, a bit of laughter, go on. Crack a smile, it won't hurt anyone. When we think of engagement, we think of a diamond ring, and that's a great example of engagement. Why? Well, because engagement says, I commit to marrying you one day. And the person says, I commit to marrying you one day too. And we are both committed to each other to something that's going to happen in the future. The idea of engagement isn't to stay engaged. The idea of engagement is to get married. The idea of me engaging you right now isn't to keep engaging you forever. It's actually to engage you over the next 20 minutes or so to impart an idea. And of course, the idea of commitment is wonderful here. Person one says, I do. Person two says, I do too. Brand says, I do. Because customer says, I do too. Brand says, I want to offer you this great experience. Person says, I want to have the great experience. And we commit to make the most out of that relationship. The employer says, I want you to have a really great time working here and being immersed in this great company. If it's an engaging company, that's what they say. And the employee says, yes, and I commit to making the most of our relationship by doing the best work I can. And so we've got this engaging work environment. We make the most of each other. Or we've got an app and a user, right? An app is saying, well, the good apps are saying, I want you to use me. I want you to get benefit from using me. And the user says, yes, I want to commit to that. I want to be involved in making the most out of this app. And the apps where we don't make the most out of them, well, they slowly go from our home screen to a folder, to the folder on the second screen, and eventually they get deleted. And the workplaces where we don't feel like we're making the most of that job get replaced by new jobs where we hope we can make the most of it there. And the brands and the products and the ideas that we feel that we aren't making the most of, we have them, but then we replace them with something better. And sadly, in our relationships, the relationships that we aren't making the most of, sometimes people split up, sometimes people get divorced. Because engagement is about making the most of a relationship. That's what engagement is. Engagement is the process of making the most of a relationship. And I think that's really beautiful. I think it's so beautiful. I've spent 8 years thinking constantly about this. Now, of course, we're at a web conference, we're at a tech conference, you are app developers, website builders. How does this apply to you? Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to look at the ways and the psychology of how somebody goes through the process of engaging with you and what each of those 6 stages looks like and how that would relate to your app, to your website, to your product, to your brand, whatever it is it might be. And of course, my premise with all of this, again, is that it works like it does with a relationship. So to explain this, let's first quickly establish why we want to get people engaged. And there's quite a compelling reason why we want to get people engaged in our products and in our apps. I mean, in case you don't know this, I feel like I'm stating the bleeding obvious, but let's just say it for good measure. An engaged customer is 3 times more valuable per year. That's in terms of the amount of, the frequency of their spending, how much they spend per transaction, and their loyalty to you per year. Engaged companies in the S&P 500, which is a stock index, engaged companies have a 29.9% increase in stock price year on year if they are practicing engagement with their customers and their employees. I mean, that's huge, right? As an investor, that's what you want to be investing your cash. Engaged users offer a 23% premium over unengaged users in terms of their advocacy and their value to you. And people who are engaged, particularly people who are engaged in a community, feel 8 times more connected to your brand or to your message, so that they are more willing to put up with when things don't go very well, they'll remain loyal to you. And also when you release a new product, they're more likely to try it. So it makes complete and utter sense for us to think about how we get engaged, how we get people engaged. So let's look at how we do it. I put this on the screen not to scare you. Scary model, scary framework. Hopefully we're going to find this to be really nice and simple and, well, let's give it a go. So how does engagement work, right? What are the 6 stages of engagement? Imagine that you're walking down the street. Okay, so you walk down the street. And, cars coming past you, and a big van drives by. And on the side of that big van, you've got a great big, advert for a bread company. How many of you do you feel that you're likely to remember that advert once the bus drives past you? If you feel that you would remember the bread advert on the bus when it passes you, put your hand up. No one. Okay, put your hand up your other hand if you feel that you would not remember the bread advertisement and it goes past with you. That's most people, and the others who aren't putting their hands up. I clearly need to work harder at getting you engaged today. You see, most messages that come into our life, we don't actually acknowledge. The first stage of engagement is acknowledgement. That's the number 1 there. Anything that we do not acknowledge, we have not been engaged by. There are tons of companies in Czech. I don't know who they are, what they do. I'm not from here. They don't engage me because I'm not even aware of them. I don't even acknowledge them. There are many of you here. I'd love to meet you, but I've not said hello to you. You've not said hello to me, or we've not said ahoy, and I've not been able to say, and interact with you. And as a result, we haven't really acknowledged each other. We're not really engaging with each other. But when you finally acknowledge something because it is undeniably in front of you, you go to the first stage of engagement. Spam is not engaging because you don't acknowledge it. I do not remember the spam that I delete. It's not engaging. In fact, this is where a lot of advertising is really suffers, particularly in the realm of sponsorship. Most sponsorship in terms of product placement, we do not remember. I do not remember the pull-up banners that I see. I do not remember the logos on lanyards and things that I see. I just don't remember it. Because we don't acknowledge it. It just comes and goes. We've got very good at fine-tuning out the things that are trying to engage with us. So how do you become acknowledged? Well, the best way to be acknowledged is for someone else to tell you about it, right? 92% of people will trust a word-of-mouth endorsement over anything else. It is the most trusted way to hear about something. So that's the way that we acknowledge things generally, is because somebody tells us about it, or it is done in such a demanding, remarkable, attention-grabbing way that we have to look at it. So if you want people to acknowledge you, there are one or two things that you need to do. Either you get new users to find out about you because someone tells them about you, or you do something that is so remarkable they have to look at you. Those are your two tactics for getting someone to acknowledge you. Banner advertising, low amount. Lots and lots of PR, low amount. But if you can get someone to recommend you, you're in. Or if you can do something remarkable, you increase your chances of being in. So that's the first level. Now, when we acknowledge that somebody's putting out a message to us, the next thing we do is go and explore it and find out what it means. We want to understand it. So I send to you an invitation to come to my party. And if I send you an invitation to come to my party, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go, okay, when is the party? Where is the party? Do I need to get a plane to fly to England to be at the party? Am I free that day? If somebody meets you and they ask you to go out on a date, you begin exploring those options. You look at them, you evaluate it, you try to do a cost-benefit ratio in your mind very, very quickly. You try to figure it out. You might ask your friends, what do you think? You explore your options. If you hear about a new app, what do? You get out your phone, you get up the app, you have a look at it, you explore it. So the very next thing that we do when we are engaging is we go from acknowledging something to then exploring it, seeking to understand it. And the best thing that we can do here as people who want to get users to use our products is to make it really easy for people to explore and understand us. The trouble is that so many apps and websites are actually quite bad at making it easy for us to understand them. Have any of you ever been to one of those Chinese restaurants where the menu is about 10 pages long and everything is really, really tiny, and you're just looking at reams and reams of different menu options, and you open it up and you just go, I don't even know where to begin here. You just kind of close your eyes and just pick one. That's like the best you can do. Well, unfortunately, a lot of the time, that's what it's like exploring and trying to understand something. I remember years ago, I used to use Final Cut Pro. It's a great video editing program by Apple. This was before the day when you could install things online, right? So when I bought it, they sent me this massive package, Final Cut Pro package. This is like 12 years ago. So the package arrives, big box. I'm like, oh, yes, editing studio in a box. I'm going to be a star. So I unwrap the box. I open the box up. You know that lovely Apple unboxing experience, just the suction as it, like the sound of Darth Vader's helmet in Empire Strikes Back. Open it up. No Star Wars watchers here. Come on, if you get that one, put your hand up. Thank you. Just checking. Otherwise, I'd have to leave. So, and then I open it up, and guess what's inside? A little CD, a little DVD, and the rest of it is just manuals. These ginormous, thick, nicely designed, okay, but thick, heavy manuals. And you're like, where on earth do I begin? I do not know where to begin. That's what it's like when we try to use so many apps and products these days, if we've got no idea where to begin. Now, on the other hand, the best menus are the menus that you open them up and they say starter, and you've got 3 choices because they're the 3 things that they do best. And then it says mains, and they've got 3 choices. One's meat, and one's vegetarian, and one's vegan or fish or something. And it's the 3 things they do best. And then at the end, you've got dessert. And they are the 3 best desserts they do. Ice cream by itself is not there because it's meant to be, this is an exciting dessert menu. Those are the best menus. They make it easy for us. They give us a starter and a main and a dessert. And so when it comes to people exploring us, and they literally unbox us, that's what we do when we explore something or explore a person or an idea. We begin to play around with it. We begin to unbox it. We take things apart and we go, where does this go? What does that do? How does that work? Let me understand it. The best way is to make it a menu. Right, so that's that stage. The third stage, when somebody engages with us, is they go now from being someone who's interacting with us through the menu to now going, okay, I'm going to place an order. I'm going to do something. To use the example of my wife and I, well, she's now my wife. I spoilt the ending there, didn't I? To use this girl and I, this crazy blonde bombshell, we went out on a date, right? Because that's the action that you take in a relationship, is you go out on a date. Now, the key with getting people to act and do something is to make it easy for someone to act and do something. This is why dates generally are quite good. And in the web world, we talk about calls to action, right? Now, the best calls to action are just like a button. You just push them, and it does the thing for you. So the next stage that you want to do is you want to get people to kind of respond to you by doing something, right? Pushing the button, being involved, interacting with you. Now, it's fascinating. There's some really interesting studies about buttons and what makes for a good button. So the best buttons, according to the research, and you probably know this as a range of UX people in the room and everything, is that the best buttons, first of all, are in a high contrasting color to the rest of the page. Right? So generally, the button color should be kind of different to every other color on the palette, which is really cool, but really difficult if you're kind of, really particular about your colors. You might not like that. But generally, like a nice green button is good. People are more likely to click the button if it's got a very defined border, as opposed to not defined border. And people are more inclined to click it if it kind of has a hover effect, right? It changes color, or it kind of elevates itself off the page a bit. There's a little bit of a border around it. There's a bit of a shadow when you hover over it. All of these things make for a great button. And the thing with a button, right? What do you do with a button? You press the button. You push the button. Preferably with the Chemical Brothers song, Galvanize, The Time Has Come to Push the Button, playing as you push the button. I appreciate that laughter there. You know the song. It's a good one, isn't it? The time has come to push the button. Yeah, go. Thank you, yes. Of course, sadly, many calls to action are not buttons. They're these kind of like vague requests. Think about this in the workplace. One of the hardest things in the workplace is when someone makes a request that's not a request. Hey, I was wondering, would you be, could possibly you be free if, I was thinking maybe we could, what do you think? What? Come again? Very often our language, we're not clear about what it is that we're asking for. We're not clear about the response that we want. And so someone is trying to engage with us, but it's not really a button. It's just, what do I do here? How do I engage with this? So the best way to get someone to act and to do something is to push the button. Right, so that's the first kind of half of this model. And what you'll see is all of these things here there's that word reason at the bottom. These all require reasons for people to engage with you. So people will only ever engage with you at this level if they have a reason to. If there's a reason for them to be involved in what you're doing, to be a part of what you're doing. Generally, that's because there's a very clear benefit for them, what have you. That's fine. And what we find is this is kind of moderately effective if you want to engage people to a kind of usage level. People who are engaged here are like the people that use Microsoft Word for years and years and years and years. But they never go to the fourth level, which is identify. Quick poll again. How many people here identify themselves as being a Microsoft Office user? You kind of go, I am a Word user. I own that. I'm a Word user. A couple of people, okay. How many people would identify themselves as being a user of other bits of software? So there is a bit of software that you go, I'm a user of that. I'm a Photoshop-er, I'm a Excel-er, I'm a WordPress-er, I'm a Facebook-er, a Twitter-er. Hands. Yeah, that'd be most of us, right? Because there's something very powerful that happens when we go between the act stage and the identify stage. Now, I have to confess, I'm regretting now not putting lots of images in here to show you how this works. We had a really cool image, but I just wasn't getting it right in my mind, so I thought I'd scrap it, and now I wish I'd done it. So I'm feeling a bit foolish. I might have to try and pose it for you. So use your imagination for a moment, if you will. There's this fantastic book called The Disciples. And in The Disciples, a photographer decided to stand outside Madison Square Gardens for a year. And every time there was a different concert, this photographer, I think it was a guy, he had his stall outside and he photographed the fans coming to hear the different musicians. So you had some people who came and they were wearing all black with, makeup and stuff on and maybe a gimp mask or something. They were fans of Slipknot, right? And then you had some people that came and they were wearing high heels and like bright pink colors and they were fans of Madonna. And then you had some people that came and they were wearing just regular clothes. They were fans of Cliff Richard. And then you had some people that came and they were like completely gothed out with cowboy hats. They were fans of Motorhead. And then you had some people that came and they were wearing very little and they were fans of Lady Gaga. And it's this great thing about how we build identity. Because the thing that all of us here want is we want people that use our products to be people who identify with it, right? People that go, my identity is based off of this. My sense of who I am is based off of using this product. I derive more than just a sense of usage. I derive identity from it. I remember back in the day with Twitter, there was something identity wise that we got out of using Twitter. It was like to say that you used Twitter was to say that you were an innovator. You were someone who was really forward-thinking and innovative. So the question would be, what's the identity that your users are able to derive from using your product? What is it that they can call themselves? I know that people who work at Mozilla, right, are called Mozillians. People who work at Facebook are Facebookers. Apple always refers to itself as the Apple family. What's the language around the people that use what you do? Because that is where we begin to cross over into this idea of social identity. You see, up until this point, people have only engaged with us because there's a reason to engage with us. But there comes a point where we engage with something not because there is a clear benefit and a reason, but because we have a relationship or an attachment to it whereby we derive identity. I have 3 identical watches, all made by Swatch. That's how geeky I am. Three of these watches. One's orange, one's navy, and one's gray. Why would somebody buy 3 of the same watch, except for different colors, unless one, either they were particularly disturbed, or 2, because they derived a sense of identity from the product that they were using? I like the fact that Swatch represents Swiss design. I like the fact that the font is Helvetica on the numbers. And yes, I am judging your font choice right now. I like the fact that it's made in 1983, the same year that I was born. I like the fact that I can swap and change them and tweak them a little bit. I like that. I derive identity from that. And the great thing about a Swatch watch is what you've got here is you've got these 3 little points where the strap connects to the body of the watch. So you can instantly tell if somebody has a Swatch because it will the strap connects to the body through what are called tugs, and there are 3 of them. You got a Cartier watch? Sorry, you don't have these 3 tugs. It's Cartier, but you don't have the 3 watches. You got an Omega, very nice, but it doesn't have these 3 little things. There is a marker that immediately means I get social identity and I recognize others that have social identity. And so earlier this year when I was in the States, my wife and I were in New York, and we went into the Swatch shop, an unlikely gobstopper there, isn't it? Swatch shop at Ground Zero. And the moment I walked in, all the store attendants said, "Hey, nice Swatch." They could tell immediately because there was something between they and I that we were in the in gang. We were part of that cool group, you know. You know, it's the same thing that when you're walking down the street and you see somebody wearing the jersey of your favorite football team or your favorite club that you support, and immediately you're like, you know what? I don't know them, but they're all right because they're wearing the same color as me. It's the same thing as when you're in a foreign country, like me here in Prague. My wife and I arrived on Wednesday. We're walking around. And of course, everyone around me is, speaking Czech, as you'd expect. And it's lovely. And then out of nowhere, I hear somebody speak American with an American accent. And immediately my ears prick up and hear it because I identify with it. I derive social identity from it. That's the power of being in a tribe, is you connect with it right away. It bypasses even your mental ability to choose whether I want to engage with it. You just do because it's a point of commonality between you and it. You can't help it. When you've just passed your driving test, and then you all of a sudden notice everywhere advertisements for drivers? Before you never noticed them, and now you notice it? Before you passed your driving test, you never noticed the speed limits. Now everywhere you go, you see the speed limits. You're walking and you see the speed limit. I better slow down. Everywhere you go, you see it. You just switch because now it's become alive to you because you identify with it. That's the power of social identity. So the question is, what identity do people get from your app, from your website, from your service? Now, you might think that identity is something they derive just from you. But the real trick to this is not to get them just to identify with you, it's to get them to identify with other people who are also users of your service. Years and years ago, or not years, a couple of years ago, I was a church leader. I was a church minister. People used to call me Pastor Scott. I hated it, but they insisted. And when my wife and I moved to Plymouth to lead this church, there were about 30 people in it. It was lovely and it was great, but it was about 30 people. And we started leading it, and slowly the church grew. And over the course of about 18 months, it grew to about 150 people. That's a lot of growth for a church. Churches are generally not growing at that size. Generally, they're shrinking, not growing. But growing at 5 times is quite rare. And people would ask, how did you do it? And we would say, well, the answer is really quite simple. Is when people come to church, first of all, be friendly. That was kind of like a unique, brand new idea, Be friendly, chat to them, don't just ignore them. But the second thing that we did is we made sure that everyone who came, at least 2 people spoke to them and got to know them and said, would you like to have a coffee in the week sometime? Very, very simple idea. And yet, if you have coffee with 2 people in the week, no longer do you just have a connection with the church, you've now got a connection with 2 other people who are in the church. Very quickly, that person gets an identity that I am friends with people in the church. That's the action level. And then, so what happened is, they come to church on Sunday, they acknowledge that we want to engage them, they explore by meeting up with people in the week, they then act by coming the next week and going, oh, I'm friends with these guys, I'll sit next to them. And then identity kicks in because then they begin to see themselves as someone who's, well, I guess I'm part of the church because I'm friends with people in the church. Because if you have relationships with multiple people, it is far stronger than if you have relationships with just one. It's the idea of a triangle, right? A triangle is far stronger than just a straight line because you've got more nodes. If someone's got a relationship with just your app and no one else, and that relationship breaks, that you've got nowhere else to go. But if they've got relationships with other users, they're far more likely to stay. People stay at places where they derive identity, even when the utility is gone. How many of you here still are associated with something that the value of it is largely gone, but you still feel somewhat connected to it? You derive some sense of relationship to it? Old things in our house, old bits of clothing. We can no longer derive identity. The clothes don't fit me anymore. I put on too much weight, but I keep it because I've got a relationship to it. The 5th stage of engagement then is when someone has not only identified with you, but they go, you know what, I'm so enjoying being a user. I'm so enjoying being a something of you, right? A Facebook a user a Reuter I'm now going to go all in. I'm going to jump in the deep end, and I'm really going to experience what it's like to be fully on board with this, like really deeply engaged. And so we go to the stage of integration. This is like the place in a relationship where you go, you know what, I like you, you like me, We've been going steady for a few years now as boyfriend and girlfriend, or boyfriend and boyfriend, whatever. We've been going steady for a while. And you know what I'd like to do? Is I'd like to move in together. And you have this moment of, let's go deep. In our case, it was 20 years old, and I said to my girlfriend at the time, I said, will you marry me? And she said, yes. And we decided to integrate and go deep. When somebody gets to this level of engagement, it's because what you offer them is so enabling and empowering that they want to go deep into it, knowing that when you go deep into something, you pretty much exclude the other offerings on the table. For instance, take Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime is a great example of integration because once you've gone down the path of Amazon Prime and you've integrated with it at that level of exclusivity, in other words, you are paying for all of the free delivery, you're very unlikely to order anything from anywhere else because you've integrated so deeply with it. You've actually invested, you've paid to have a very deep relationship. And so then, of course, now, if you're an Amazon Prime member, you also get all the TV stuff. And so it increasingly becomes more and more of an exclusive relationship. And this is what's happened with the most intimate of devices for us, which are our phones. Our phones are a great example of how integration has become exclusive. If you go down the iPhone route, you get an iCloud account. Your contacts are synced to iCloud. Everything is built into that ecosystem. Your music can come from there. You've got your family connections. If you want to jump ship and go to Android, it's difficult for you to get all that across. The same way if you go to Android, you go into the Google and you go into that culture and all your contacts are based on there. And it's difficult, again, to jump ship the other way. And these tools are making it more and more exclusive to be on their platform. You've got Apple Pay and Android Pay, and both of them are like these diverging roads that, first of all, evoke identity. Are you an Apple or an Android user? And then you integrate deeply with them. And to get the most benefit, you've got to integrate the most deeply. This is, on one hand, very empowering to the user because when you do integrate, you get far more out of it. You're making the most of the relationship. But it can be manipulative. We can force people to be integrated with us when they don't want to be, and so there is some gray area here. The final level, as we kind of come to an end, is one that people rarely get to. This is when you are so engaged with someone. You are so on board with the mission of this organization. You so believe in this idea that you formally enlist in its mission. This happens in a relationship, typically when, my wife and I said to each other, you know what? I want to enlist into your DNA and have children. But we do this as well as with things that we really love. Take, for instance, WordPress, which is continually being developed by a massive group of volunteers who have enlisted in the mission of this organization, right? They have created a formal relationship, and they're people that have gone from being the person that uses it very deeply, they are now the person that helps others use it very deeply. So I wonder, with the products that you have, the services that you offer, the apps that your users can use, is there a way for those people to engage with it at such a level that they now become the person that helps others engage with it? Can they become your teachers? Can they become your onboarders? Can they become your advocates? Not just in an informal way, but in a formal way. Because when we take someone through a formal ritual, their commitment is high. There've been I've really enjoyed the sessions over the last day and a half. I mean, this has really been fantastic. It's rare that I get to go to a conference where I get so much out of it myself. And every talk I've been to has been riveting. And one of them was talking about onboarding, and a few people talking about onboarding. And of course, generally we see onboarding as something that is done, by the app. If we use apps, for example, it's done by the app for the app. What would it be like? What would the psychology be, the engagement be like, if you introduced into your onboarding process an opportunity for those who were super engaged to welcome the new people and to make that part of your onboarding as well as the product's onboarding itself? What would it mean for me if I was using an app and I began to get to know other people who are using that app, not just in a customer support and their name changes at the bottom of every email that I get and I don't really know who I'm talking to? What if I actually got to build a legitimate bond with someone? It might only be an email every now and then, but what if that happened? What would it be like if we began to introduce human engagement again back into the things that we do? It doesn't need to be a high level, but I'm curious, what would that mean? Would it mean that our super users stay with us for longer because they derive so much more identity from it? Would it mean that people who are new build genuine friendships? I'm curious about that. In the UK, there is a disruptive mobile phone operator called giffgaff. And they don't have customers, they have members. And the idea is that if you're a member, you help the other members. And so this customer support is run by the people who love using their service but are not paid. And they formally enlist in the organization, and you can get an answer to your query in 90 seconds by going on the giffgaff community forum website. 90 seconds on average, your question will be answered. That's faster than most call centers is what they advertise it as. I'm just curious, what would it be like if we began to really enlist the people that are passionate about our products? I enjoy Apple because, unlike Android users, I like design. Just looking for the reaction there. And I would be buzzing if Apple said to me, hey, Scott, would you formally enlist in our organization for something? I love Lego. I haven't played it in years, but I played it so much as a kid, it's like hardwired into me. I'd love it if Lego said to me, hey, can you come and... I wonder what opportunities are there if we could begin enlisting the people that love what we do the most. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Before I close, I have one wonderful privilege, which is I've spent 8 years thinking about this stuff constantly. And it's been a joy and a curse, but I'm very glad that I've been able to launch my book on the subject, which I have here. And so it's now available to buy, and I'm launching it at Web Expo. So yes, I'm privileged, and if you go to shapeofengagementbook.com, you can get a free download with all of these slides and chapter summaries and tons of stuff, and you can access all of that. And I would like to say the download is very good. So there's auditing tools that you can download from it, and you can get a whole bunch of stuff that will really help you use these ideas. The book has 7 frameworks. We've gone through 2 today, so I do hope that you have a look at it. Otherwise, thank you very much. I hope that if you can remember something today, it would be that chicks don't dig scars. Thank you very much.